This is the self-faced V-neck with a gusset. Now I'm going to turn this over because this is really what we're learning to construct today. Now the object of a self-facing, when you have a self-facing on, say, a neckline, you see this a lot in evening. You don't want a facing set on. You want a fold, which is thinner and it's more flexible. But by just cutting a facing on the body, you're going to lose this here, which we'll talk about in the pattern making. But it's one of those techniques that whenever you have some sort of angle that you need to add a facing to, it's good to know this particular technique, and it works on any angle. So we're going to be covering the pattern making and marking and construction. So we have a lot of work to do. Let's get busy. Before we construct the gusset for the V-neck, I'm going to talk about the pattern. Now, in this particular example, which is what we're going to be using to make the sample, this line here and this line here are the finished edges of the V-neck. The distance from here to here and here to here is 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. You could make that really any size you want. But this here is going to be the facing. I've drawn a line from here down to the point of the V. I'm going to call this point C because this will come in handy later. But I'm going to show you, I'm going to bring this piece of paper in. If you cut down to point C and fold everything back, you notice that you have missing fabric in this area here. So the object of the game here is to create an extension of the facing to fill in that area. That is the point of this exercise. So now go back to this here. So you want to draw two lines parallel to this midline that we just drafted. So you could draft these 1/4 inch on either side. So now I'm going to label those point A, point B, point C, point D, and point E. So have a good look at those. You're probably wondering what these all represent. This to here, to here, to here, and to here represents the stitching line that you will then use to sew the gusset to the body. I've gone off camera and cut the paper off of here. I want to remark point A and point E because they're going to be helpful later. And you can see here I've cut the paper down to the center. So I'm going to turn this over and fold along these two edges. So the folds represent the finished edge of the garment. Now, you notice, you can see we have this area here we need to fill. So what I have found makes all of this easier is we want to first fold everything. We want to know where the center line is on this because the facing we want to be symmetrical. So what I will do then is from point E or point A, depending on which side you're using, you're just going to draft a curve, and that can be really any shape you wish, but then I want to trace it so when I open it up on the other side we have a line. So next, we want to trace out this area, which represents the facing. Now this shape will vary depending on your angle and depending on the decision you make as far as the shape of this. So don't worry if it doesn't look exactly like what this example is. So I'm going to bring in a piece of paper. So let me just kind of indicate. We're going to start here. We're going to trace all the way over to E. We're going to trace up to D, down to C, up to B, over to A. So this whole thing traces off just on the stitching lines. The mistake people will make is they'll trace it on the cut edge. Don't do that. Use these lines A, B, C, D, and E. So that we're going to trace it to here. Trace the angle. Trace this angle. And again, you can see I'm using the pencil line, not the cut edges, as my guide for the stitching. And then I'm going to remove this. See, we have this. So I'll go off camera and go over this in pencil and bring you back the results. So here you can see we have the gusset and we have the body. You can see that A to B to C to D to E here is A to B to C to D to E here. So now what I will do is I'll tape this closed before I cut fabric, just to make everything easier. So as you can see, this will eventually fill in what's missing on the self-facing. So I'm back from the pressing table. So what I have done here is I'm using muslin, just regular old muslin, but I have backed it with the fusible tricot. It's going to make working with this easier. I would say make your sample out of something like a nice wool to begin, but this is a good starting place. So this is going to be the body. This is going to be the gusset. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to cut. I'm going to cut A and E off. Sorry, I'll relabel that in a moment. So there's that, and A and E. And here, it doesn't hurt just to get rid of some of this for now. You can always trim that out later. So we have now the two pattern pieces. And so what I will do on the body, you don't need to see this, there's no mystery there. What I will do is I will go over to the machine and sew with a 0.5 stitch from A to B to C to D to E. And then I will bring it back and show you the results. So here we are back from the sewing machine, and I've used black stitching so that this, you can see here, this has all been sewn with the black stitching. So now to prepare the body to receive the gusset. I'm going to back off just a little bit here. So you first want to cut down this center line down to point C, right to the stitching. This is a short stitch, so you cut right to the stitching. Then what we're going to do is we're going to cut over to point B, and we're going to cut over to point D. Just turn it right side up so you can get a sense here. So these are the cuts. These are going to come in handy next when we pin the gusset to the body. So our next step is to pin the right side of the gusset to the body. So we want to match points B, C, and D here with B, C, and D here. So I'm going to turn this over and come in with the pin. And you want the pin here at point C on the body to match point C on the gusset. So I'm going to pin that for now. Then I want to match point B with point B. So there's that one there. These change a little bit, sorry, but same thing, you get the idea. So we're matching these three corners first. So that was matched. And then we match this one here. Like so. Okay, so we have matched points B, C, and D. First step. Now from here, this is a little bit tricky, but it's good to see. So I like to lay this out flat because you want to match up this stitching line with the stitching line on the gusset. So you're going to let the fabric open up at point B. And so what you want to do is turn this over to C. Oh, come down a little more. And this is why you match and why you have stitching lines marked. So we're matching this point here with this point here. There. And then pin based. You could also hand baste with needle and thread. I do not discourage that. I think it certainly ensures accuracy. So you just want to make sure that this stitching line, when you're pin basting, it all matches. There we go. So we pin from here to here, and it matches on the back as well. So then, here, and you can actually angle these a little bit that way if you need to. So again, you swing this over, and you match here with here. There we are. Okay, so this will give you a little idea here of what it looks like. Next, we will go to the sewing machine to sew this. So as you can see, we're at the sewing machine, and I'm using the generic adjustable zipper foot. You set, as you can see, set the needle right at the edge of the foot. Having this foot is going to make this construction so much easier. You can do it with a regular foot, but why? This foot is not terribly expensive. So what you want to do is you want to start by putting the needle in right at point A. And stitch length, you want like a 1.5 stitch on all of this. It doesn't have to be too tiny. It just needs to be, it just needs to be short. So I'm going to sew from A over to B. And when you're stitching, you can have the second stitch slightly to the left of the stay stitching that you made initially. And then you stop at point B, and then one stitch here. So then all this shifts back this way, because you're going to be sewing this little bit from B to C. And then turn it again, and from C to D. And then from D to E. So I'll take this out of the machine, trim the threads, and bring you back the results. So we've sewn from here to there, down to here, up to here, and over to here. I'm going to show you the back because it's good to see. On the back, if you have a little bit of wobbliness here or here, that's not going to kill you. It's more crucial to make sure that the stay stitching gets hidden in the final seam. Next, we go to the pressing table. So next, before we actually press, I'd like to trim the seam allowances down. So what that's going to look like, you trim to match like so. And then I like to clip out these corners because you don't want those to create bulk inside the garment. So there we go. And then you want to clip from here down to point C. So we have all of our clipping done. So from here, we press. First step in pressing, press as sewn. No mystery there. And then a seam roll. This is a tiny seam roll, but it's extremely useful. What you want to do is press all of these seams open. So I'm going to press this one first, this one, and then go back to the little intersections. So you obviously don't want to press any creases that you don't want to have later. So I'm going to press this back, press this open. It's better to press all of this open before you turn the facing. It's going to give you a much better result. And so then here, same thing. So as you can see, I've pressed these two. Now I want to press these little triangles open. It may not seem important, but strangely enough, it is. So each one, individually, you're going to press that open. And then this one here. Okay, so let me bring it up to the camera. So yeah, you can see these are pressed open. All of this is pressed open. Now, next, I'm going to change the camera angle so you can see where it's going from here. So now, before we fold this back into position, you want to trim off this to the finished size. Now, when you're using this particular method to finish a self-facing, the lining will go up and cover these cut edges. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to put this onto the sleeve board here. And we're going to fold it on this fold line. Just give it a little steam. And then same thing on the other side. Fold it. Again, don't press any creases in that you don't want. So I like to just position it, steam it first, finger press it. If you want to really give it a hard press, you can do that later. So let me just show you the result here. See there. And now I like to go in and just press in there a little bit to smooth it all out. You don't use the steam on this, just get in there with your iron. And then a little press here. Okay, so let's have a look. Not bad. It would finish better if you were working on a different fabric. Muslin shows up every single flaw. But see, the object here is that this adds in the fabric that you need so that you can have a self-faced V neckline. And there you have it.